Hi, welcome to another edition of Brooklyn Versus. I'm your host for the evening, Chris Lazarro, and today we're going to talk greatest sports dynasties in every sport. So who's yours? And who are the guys next to me? If you haven't already, please subscribe, Bridgeside Network. Hey, let's get the debate going.
Go Bridgeside!
Hi, and welcome back. Like I said, I am your host for this evening, Chris Lazarro. And to my left, we have our good old friend, buddy, Andrew Conti.
Hello.
And we have the hockey and wrestling and many more things expert, Steven, over here.
What's going on?
And this weekend, we have quite a big Super Bowl coming up with the New England Patriots in their 9th Super Bowl in a short amount of time. And it has triggered this conversation of the greatest sports dynasties in general, every sport. So, without further ado, let's just kind of go by.
Let's
go one sport at a time. Let's talk about all the sports.
Let's get the debate going.
Yeah. let's get the debate going.
Yeah.
A Bridgeside traditional quote, huh?
Yeah,
shall we?
Yeah. Break it out.
Let's start with this thing called basketball.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Basketball,
that's a good one.
Invented by a man named James Naismith. Not Stephen A. Smith, James Naismith.
Totally different.
Yeah. Let's kick it off with Andrew over here. Who would you say, and we'll get into the more specifics, who would you say is the best basketball dynasty of all time?
Well, it's really easy to say the Celtics, winning 8 straight titles. It's really easy to say
in the
90s.
In the 50s
in
and
the
60s.
60s, yeah. It's really easy to say the 90s Bulls with Jordan, but this is my first show. I think I'm going to come out with a big statement.
Hot take.
Hot take.
No.
I'm going to argue it is entirely possible that we are living in the greatest basketball dynasty.
You're saying that the Golden State Warriors could be, but are they a dynasty? Is that what you're saying?
3 championships in 4 years and 1 game away, 1 minute away from having 4 in a row.
Doesn't count. That doesn't count.
In a season where they won 73 games.
Doesn't count.
And
the most of all time,
and looking very good this year, looking like they could win another one.
The criteria is what's different for a lot of people, and I understand where you're coming from with the Warriors, but for me, it has to be those Celtics. 8 straight championships, guys like Bill Russell, having one of the greatest coaches of all time, Red Auerbach. There's no way. Even the Lakers, if you go to Showtime, you go to Kareem, you go James Worthy, all of those guys. Even later on with Phil Jackson and Shaq and Kobe and those teams. I think that's a little bit better.
But
so you're going with the Lakers or the Celtics?
I'm going with the Celtics. Okay. I'm going with the Celtics.
But I mean, there were 9 teams in the league
for sure. But that's the way the game is
and
played.
I also would argue I think we should put more weight towards sustained periods of success in later time periods that are closer to recent years, because back then you didn't have You didn't have such widespread. You didn't have free agency. There was much less player mobility.
For sure.
You were able to keep a core team of, around Bill Russell.
The game was also considerably different in terms of physicality. Yes. So if you're weighting this, that's where the criteria gets iffy. The only thing that matters, for me at least, my criteria, and for most people I would say, is championships. You play to win the game. That's the quote.
But I actually love Andrew's argument, and yes, the one criteria we could say is championships. But what if back in the 40s there were only 2 teams? You can't say, it's only championships, because the fact that there was only 9 teams, that's
so the Harlem Globetrotters aren't a dynasty?
Oh, well, that's different. I mean, that's like what?
It's a dynasty.
50 years undefeated?
Exactly. But there's only 2 teams.
I'm an NFL Blitz champion, but I only play against my brothers. Does that make me a dynasty?
In your
household, yes.
For 100% at the dinner table, I'm sure it does.
I'll just throw out a couple more teams for honorable mention before we move on to another topic. It's San Antonio Spurs, current, even though over a longer period of time, 15 years, they're kind of like the Patriots of basketball.
Yeah, that's another example of maybe the championships were very spread out for the Spurs over a 20-plus
So it started in
sustained period of
'99. They won
success.
the first championship in '99 versus the Knicks.
But
of course.
97
But they
was
were
the
good all through the
Yeah,
90s
Yeah,
as
97 was the first year of that streak where they hadn't missed the playoffs. They've had at least 50 wins. It went from David Robinson passing the torch to a guy like Tim Duncan and Tony Parker, Manny Ginobili, and then Kawhi Leonard towards the end of it. Quietly, they've built quite a dynasty for themselves.
Do you think it's continuing at all with DeRozan and Aldridge, or the dynasty's over?
I don't think so. I don't think we're gonna see the Duncan level success for a while with the Spurs.
Moving on, let's talk about a little hockey. Now,
Now I'm
I
excited.
will just come out and say this. I'm not a hockey person. We all know that, right? But I do, being in New York, I know that the Islanders won 4 in a row.
Oh, yeah?
Right before I was born in the early 80s.
Islanders
but-
4 straight from 80 to 83 with guys like Billy Smith. You're talking about Ken Morrow. You're talking about guys like Mike Bossy. That whole crew.
I know Potvin.
Dennis Potvin. Yeah,
know
absolutely,
Potvin.
absolutely.
So who do you think, Steven, I'll kick it off with you, who do you think is the best hockey
For me,
team
it
of
has
all
to
time?
be the Edmonton Oilers of the 80s, the dynasty that followed the Islanders after. From 85 to 90, winning 5 Stanley Cups. They had Gretzky, they had Yari Curry, Paul Coffey, some of the greatest teams ever. And then when Gretzky left to go to the LA Kings, they still won again with their young group of kids. They just restocked. There's so many guys on that team.
So you're going Edmonton late 80s.
Edmonton late 80s, 100%.
I mean when I hear that argument, the 4 straight titles does just look better when you're seeing it
Oh, for
on
sure.
the list of Stanley Cup winners when you see the same name 4 times in a row. But I would like to point out, it's my understanding that the Canadians have 35
Is it
Stanley
Canadians
Cups?
or Canadians? I need to know that.
If
Canadians
you're
or
a Canadians
Canadians?
fan, you call them the Habs.
Oh, okay.
But the Montreal.
My Habs have 35 Stanley
Your
Cups.
abs? Your abs? Have,
No, 23 Stanley Cups. The only franchise that has more in North American sports is who we'll get to.
Oh,
a
we'll
little
get
bit
to
later.
We'll get to that.
But yeah, 5 straight Stanley Cups from 56 to 60, 4 championships in 5 years from 65 to 69, not to mention all of the ones in between, guys like Maurice the Rocket Richard, his brother Henri, all of these guys, classic. If you're a hockey fan anytime before the year of 1970, you were probably a Canadiens fan or a Bruins fan.
oh, wow. Let me ask you this. Out of the last 5 or 10 years, there's been only a couple teams to win multiple titles, if I'm not mistaken. The Boston Bruins, Chicago Blackhawks. Is there any team you see right now that a dynasty is emerging?
A dynasty that could possibly be emerging. One that should have emerged
Penguins?
is the Penguins, which you can consider that a dynasty, but there were so many opportunities that were also blown. Here's the thing for me. Hockey is one of the most evenly competitive sports throughout the league.
That's
it's
true,
much
yes.
more difficult with an 83-game season and the full grind and the way that the sport is structured, especially post-lockout, to be able to build a team like that. I thought the Capitals would have had something with Ovechkin as well, but they just won last year.
in hockey, you see routine with somewhat regularity, 8 seeds knocking off 1 seeds and 7 seeds knocking off 2 seeds. That's why there's considerably more parity in the NHL,
Yes.
which is another barrier to creating a dynasty, which is why
It's the any given Sunday argument in football.
Yes, I think that if you compare, say, hockey to basketball, if you look at the list of NBA champions, it looks like just
Higher
going from
seeds.
dynasty to dynasty through the years. But it's way easier to do that in basketball because there's much less parity.
Basketball
But
is more of a sport of success that's indicated and predicated on the power of individuals. If you have
Yes, that's
3
true.
superstar players, you can win your division with ease. Hockey, you got to go a little bit deeper.
It's exactly.
But at the same time, getting the hot goalie at the right time can send you all the way through to
Does
the
work.
to
the
cup.
hot goalie in hockey and the hot pitcher in baseball. Basketball is actually the only sport. I would put football second, but basketball is the only sport that pretty much the best team always wins. And part of it
I would agree.
is the 7-game series, which because I would argue in football, if there was a 7-game series, which obviously you can never
You can never do
the
that,
best team
yeah.
would win. But in baseball and hockey, it gets thrown
Cream
off
rises
because
to
of
the
the
top.
goalies and the pitchers.
Yeah, you get
so the
hot
best team doesn't
streaks.
always win.
Yeah, if one
My
guy
opinion.
having a great game, you're absolutely right.
The Bulls are going to win. The Spurs were going to win. The Warriors were going to win. You know, this year, just coincidentally, I think the 1 seeds in the NFL made the Super Bowl. But every year is different. The
year is
Giants
different,
make runs as an 8-8 team as a wild card. You know, moving on.
All right.
Shall we?
Sure.
Let's talk about our hometown team that
This is
may
the
or may
part
not
I've
be
been
a
waiting
fan
for.
of.
I feel
Actually,
dirty.
no.
dirty.
Let me not say that. Let me ask you, Andrew, who do you think the best dynasty in baseball has been of all time?
Well, I mean, if you really look at the Oakland A's, but no. I mean, okay. The question is which Yankee dynasty is the best of all time?
Yeah.
And I think it's a toss-up between the 50s Yankees and the 90s Yankees. 50s, you had them winning. You had, DiMaggio, Mantle, Berra. You had so many greats on that team. They won basically every World Series of the 50s. But another thing I hinted at earlier, in the 90s, there was a lot more competition. There's more teams to compete with in the 90s. You had interleague play going on. And so I think if you maybe took the 90s Yankees and put them in the 50s, they probably would have seen as much success, if not more.
I will only disagree with that point that you're making there, only because the sport was completely different. A guy like Derek Jeter would never have played the sport of baseball back then. He would have been pushed out from a standpoint of physicality, from a standpoint of not having the ability to lead a team necessarily with that attitude of being the nice guy.
You think so?
You couldn't be a nice guy in baseball then.
I mean,
I think Jeter's adjustable, though.
Jeter is a fantastic ball player and a fantastic leader for his era.
I mean, if you watch some of those old dives into home,
the Yankees of the 90s is probably the best dynasty. I hate to say it because I am a Mets fan through and through.
As am I.
But I think there are 28 World Series total, if I'm not mistaken, 27. It's 28 too many.
It's all over the stadium and all over signs of New York.
They have
but
one last
well-deserved.
They have one last shot. If they don't win the World Series this year, this will be the first decade since the 1910s that the Yankees have not won a World Series.
Which is an incredible stat.
It doesn't seem like they haven't won it in 10 years. It does not seem like that, right? The Sabathia,
Because they're always. I don't think they've had
Rodriguez.
a sub 500 season in like 25 years, something like that. Even when the fans talk about how bad they are.
I was just going to say, the greedy
it's like
fans.
they won 88 games and missed the playoffs by half a game. Just clean house.
They're used to a certain level of success, the fans of the Yankees, and rightfully so. They've put together great teams. They've had great success, and so they should reap the rewards.
Great success.
Great
I
success.
like you.
Yeah.
Now we haven't yet mentioned the Murderers Row Yankees of the 20s.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
you were alive during that.
Oh, yes.
A lot of experience.
Lou Gehrig.
Yeah, you have, like 6 straight legendary power hitters going one after another.
But I would
on those
make
teams?
the same argument about how many teams were in the league at that time.
That's true.
So-
That's why I feel it's a toss-up between 50s and 90s, but I think we need to at least give
But we
Babe
can
Ruth
we can all agree that it's the Yankees and no other team. I mean, just think about any other franchise in baseball that would be close. What would you say?
Nah,
If you look at the Big Red Machine of the 8, and no, it doesn't.
I was gonna say yes. You cannot say that any dynasty is near the Yankees, but if I could just relate it to current dynasties, the 2 that are honorable mention are the the 3. The St. Louis Cardinals, the San Francisco Giants, and now the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah.
The 3 or 4 in
If
the
they kept
last
that
8,
even
9
year
years.
streak going for one more, it would have been. I think that would have been that would have been dynasty level for them.
I think the Giants had it. I think the Cardinals definitely did, with a measure of success that came out of nowhere, and they continued to build it, predicated on pitching and playing the
Great
game
organization.
of baseball.
There's certain organizations like
Yes.
the general managers. They kind of
They're just
snap their
they're
fingers
just
and,
always in
and
the
magic
picture.
happens. The Red Sox,
The Cardinals,
the
Red Sox, and Yankees, they're always going to be in the picture because they have good ownership, they have good farm systems.
You saw that with the Cubs when Theo Epstein left from Boston and moved on over there. He had the same success. It's about the culture that you bring. A guy like Steinbrenner brought a certain culture to the Yankees, which said, we are going to win, and I don't care how we do it, how much money it's going to be. And Jerry Krause for the Bulls, another one. Robert Kraft for the Patriots, another one. It starts at the top. It starts with your owner. It starts with your general manager.
Now the Atlanta Braves could have cemented themselves.
That staff was insane.
If they won 15 straight division titles and only one World Series.
Look, I don't like to talk about
and that's
that as
why
a Met
they're
fan.
I want to add one.
and that's why they're a footnote in this conversation.
I want to add one quick bonus question to
Okay.
this debate before we move on to the last sport. Most clutch pitcher of all time. Give me just two. Just
Wow.
give me a name.
Mariano
Bum.
Rivera.
Mad
That's
Bum.
what I was thinking. Yeah,
Mar-
those are the
Mariano
top two.
Rivera.
And Josh Beckett. We'll put in there, too.
100, the first player to get inducted into the Hall of Fame with
More
100%.
men have walked on the moon than have scored on Mariano Rivera in the postseason. That's
.70 ERA.
Trust me, I tried. Couldn't get there.
All right, let's move on to the. Sorry, guys. By far the most popular sport in America, and that is the NFL football. We have the Patriots Rams Super Bowl this weekend.
Yes.
Actually,
Where it all begins again.
to date us, and
Patriots.
I think most would argue that the Patriots are the best dynasty in
The greatest
in all-
football dynasty?
Yes, and not to take your jobs, but this is pretty universal. So, how are you going to argue against that, or are you going to argue for it?
I would argue for it before I would argue against it, because never has there been such consistency, and it starts, like I was saying before, at the top with the ownership, keeping the same coaching staff as much as humanly possible together at the top, with Bill Belichick keeping the same quarterback, starting in 2001, just pushing all the way through. Having that sort of level of consistency, and having a guy like Tom Brady, I know people don't like him, I personally love him.
Handsome man.
Having to be able to have a guy like that who can perform at a level with, if you say schemes, sure, fine, whatever. I don't fully buy into the fact that it's all schemes, but being able to reload every year with different receivers, guys who are, if you matched up their receivers with other receivers of other teams, you're like, these guys don't even match up. Where did Julian Edelman come from? Where did he come from? No one expected him to be anybody.
Every couple of years you see somebody like a Julian Edelman just.
Pop
The Patriots have been like the land of the misfit toys of the NFL. Guys that just they can't, that just don't fit into any other scheme. Bill Belichick's like, come over here, we'll see what you do right. We'll fit you into that one role that we can use you in, and you'll be successful here. And another point I can make to the Patriots' sustained level of success, it's even more impressive considering how unpredictable football is, with the extreme level of physicality to maintain this consistency.
And the one-game playoff.
True.
You got to win it to be in it, and if you lose, you're out. I would say San Francisco, the 80s San Francisco 49ers, maybe, but that's only because the 4-0 Super Bowls from Montana, this, that, and the other. But the one that should get mentioned is my team. Even though they didn't
Please
win
don't say
championships.
Dallas.
The
Bills?
Buffalo Bills.
Oh boy.
Unprecedented 4 Super Bowls in a row. Sure, they lost them all. It's okay. But I would consider that the dynasty that should have been in football. But the Patriots, it's the Patriots. I tried, guys.
I feel like the discussion of Brady versus Montana, definitely, but I think the discussion of greatest football dynasties died when they got that 5th ring.
And potentially another one.
And now potentially another one.
What do you think would have happened if Bledsoe never gets injured, do you think if Bledsoe remained the quarterback for Belichick for a few years, let's say Brady was never discovered, does Belichick go on to win any Super Bowls?
I think so. I think Drew Bledsoe was a good enough quarterback to have sustained. Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? The quarterback isn't always the main focus, but they just happened to find a guy in Tom Brady when Bledsoe got hurt who was willing to outwork every single person in the room to this day. If you don't like Tom Brady, if you don't like the fact that they always win, you at least have to respect the fact that man has an incredible work ethic. He has changed his entire diet. He's changed the way his body. He's breaking all the barriers of age that are expected from football players and sustain success.
I cannot wait to get the TB12 method so I can live just like Tom Brady. And then I can win 6 rings.
Are you 40, 41 yet?
I am not 41 yet, so I have time.
But you were born in the Lou Gehrig era.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Says 117.
Oh, I think I just have to mention, honorable mention, because they might get mad if you don't mention the Terry Bradshaw Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh, for sure,
Unbelievably successful. Before this Patriots run, I think most would argue the Steelers were
That
probably
defense
the most.
was just... I think this was one of the years where they didn't even win the Super Bowl, but the Steel Curtain defense, one of those seasons, gave up, I think, like 8 points per game.
Oh, my God.
They had stretches where they would shut out like multiple games in a row.
The early,
And
the
you
early
could say
90s Cowboys, too.
Different game
And
at the
70s
time.
Cowboys. Yeah, different game at the time, for sure.
But
So, how about this? Let's put all the sports together. What do you think is the best dynasty across all the sports, if you had to pick one?
Are you saying the best franchise ever in terms of a dynasty, or are you talking about one?
Most successful team in all of team sports.
Well, that would have to be the Yankees.
Yeah.
I would
So
say
let's make it more
franchise.
interesting by saying like best
Single season?
sustained period of success.
Oh, it absolutely.
Not over the entirety of
You could
a
look at it
franchise.
either way. I'll let
Late
you
50s
answer
or
either way.
late 50s, early 60s Montreal Canadiens, because no one was even close. Nobody in the rest of the league was even close. It was like if the Rangers won 83 games and no one came close. It was like they were playing a different sport. It was like 10 Gretzkys on the ice. And sure, the sport was different, don't get me wrong, but that's not the conversation we're having. The Habs from 56 to 60.
Andrew Zabs from 56.
Yes, exactly.
I think I would have to go with the New England Patriots because we don't even know when it's going to end.
That is true.
Brady has no signs of slowing down. They could win this weekend. They could win another one next year.
He doesn't eat a potato. He doesn't eat
It's too
potatoes.
acidifying, Stephen.
I don't...
He's never eaten a strawberry either.
If that's the
man
sacrifice for 6 championships, I can't make that sacrifice.
I think Brady is kind of in his own head. Even though it's a different sport, he wants to beat out Michael Jordan 6.
Oh, for sure.
He wants to go for
yeah.
7. That's what I think.
That's the
He's got
difference.
that.
That inch of real estate is what makes a guy like Tom Brady so successful.
Tom Brady is an absolute psycho.
Psycho. Who kisses his son on the lips, by the way.
I would say
He has
he's
the
driven.
insane mentality, and I mean psycho in a good way because of the insane mentality that he has to winning. He wakes up at the same exact time every single day without an alarm clock. He just turns on like a machine, works on his craft.
Is that
all day.
true?
That's true.
Wow.
He works on his craft all day long.
That's his job.
Yes, but he
No,
says...
but I can't believe his mind wakes him up.
Yeah.
I know some people
Some
have that
people
internal
can do
clock,
that.
but
Some people can
he's
do
got quite a schedule to...
I mean, he wakes
up
up on a pile of money next to his supermodel wife as the best player in his sport.
And he thinks to himself, I still have something to prove.
And that's why he's that guy, is my point.
He could be a lot more... This is
First
a
ballot
debate
Hall
for
of
another
Famer.
day, but
Yep.
in my opinion, he could be way more cocky than he is. Like I think like LeBron James is pretty arrogant.
It makes more people mad that he is even slightly humble. And I love it. I love every moment of it. Love you, Tom.
Well, folks, that right there was our show for the evening. We are live every Monday at 8 o'clock on Instagram and Facebook, Bridgeside Network. And every week we have a fantastic new debate. So join us for the debate, and we will see you next time.
Bye, we're leaving. This is
TB12.
Bridgeside.